PodcastCoug Season 6, Episode 6.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PodcastCoug. I am James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the PodcastCoug, where we're all things Cougar football. 30 minutes of Coug talk. We're talking about our win against Cal and our upcoming huge game against the number one Oregon State Beavers in Saturday in Pullman. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Season 6, Episode 6. Okay, it was Washington State 21, Cal 6 down at Strawberry Canyon in Berkeley. What a game. And how about Calvin Jackson making that catch of the year, right? I mean, they're talking catch of the year all over college football. 2 minutes to go in the first quarter, and the Cougs leading 7-6 over Cal. Delora throws to the corner, right, and to the end zone, pressure in his face. I mean, he just throws it and just sails right. Calvin's almost out of bounds, makes an incredible catch that you're never going to see hardly ever. This ballerina, right, 360-degree spin all the way 360, making that catch while one toe inbounds. Wow, that's incredible. And Jackson just, then he protested that, they said, nope, you're out of bounds, protested it. The rule was incomplete. And then, they reviewed it and he got 1 foot in, just inches, right? They say the game is in inches, and indeed overturned the replay. Here we are 14-6 in Berkeley, and Cal never looked back. I mean, that's it. That was so second. That was Jackson's second touchdown of the Cougs on their first 2 drives, right? And he caught that short pass, 22 yards at the goal line. I mean, just amazing. Jackson now has 3 TDs of the season, totally outclassed by Washington State. What a game. Usually when we play Cal, it is tough every single year. We play them down to the wire. They had a really good game against the Huskies in overtime, and they lost that one. So they're having their issues, but, yeah, it was great. So Cal's only score came in their first possession, right? Their first possession of the game. Their running back, Christopher Brooks, beat 2 Cougs defenders on an 11-yard touchdown run, and Brooks, he went up to the end zone, tripped over the end zone, and it's his 15th career touchdown. So here we go. I mean, back-to-back scoring drives with the Cougs right after that, 14-6, and we never looked back. We're very, very consistent, of course, on the running the ball, blocking the passes. Just obviously defense. We're going to talk about our defense on that game. We just played really, really well, and probably this is the worst Cal performance I've ever seen. Right? I mean, that I can even remember going back many years. I mean, from the 90s, Cal's always been tough. And they struggled all afternoon, right? A bizarre play on Washington State's second possession of the game that just was previewing on that second possession that we had that 2 scores, and it was 14-6. I mean, it was just a crazy game. That block punt, remember, it was recovered by Ron Stone Jr. on the 24 and advanced the ball to the 36, and then we got that first down, and then Calvin Jackson had that ballerina 360-degree spin, and by the way, Calvin ended up with 53 receiving yards and two receiving TDs for the game. So, it was just a great game. We just had the rhythm, and we took Cal out of there. They had no rhythm at all, right? We had the entire momentum of the game, and So, for Chase Garbers, he didn't throw a single touch. First time in the season that he did not throw a single touchdown for Garbers. Finished the day at 152 yards, completing 14 out of 30 passes and 1 interception. Garbers were sacked. He was sacked like 4 times. Cal only had like 14 first downs compared to we had 21 first downs. So most impressive quality of our defense, how quickly it adjusted and came together. I mean, our defense has the maturity level of this team, the speed D that we haven't seen in a few years, right? I mean, just a killer day at Berkeley, right? Strawberry Canyon. I was almost at that game. I almost went down for that game. I should have. After that loss from Utah, I decided not to, but it would have been fun. But from a defensive perspective, the culture, the maturity, totally, excited to see, how this plays out for the rest of the season, right? I mean, if we keep this on track with Dickert, I am very excited about the rest of the year, right? Defense held Cal to 6 points, fewest Washington State has given up in the Pac-12 since 2017. All right, so that's our best defensive game really in 4 years, right? So the Cougs forced 7 punts, 4 sacks, while Garbers was just uneasy. Garbers was just not easy in the pocket. He was uneasy all day long. So this is a very disruptive game. What we saw was very disruptive all day long. Sacks, hitting hard, moving to the pocket, creating confusion on Garbers, just totally disruptive. That's the way it should be, right? Granted, it was Cal. I mean, Cal is probably having one of their worst years, but they did show up at the UW. So even though they lost that game in overtime, it was a totally different Cal team at the UW. So who knows what's going to happen with Cal this season. They are just totally in the cellar. But, let's talk about the Fab Four, right? Ron Stone Jr., Brennan Jackson, Andrew Edson, and Willie Taylor. You guys are great. Just super. Fab Four. Cal converted 3 of 15 third downs. That's it. 3 out of 15. And Dickert is bringing back the speedy D. Pac-12 offenses are just slowing down these days, and we're bringing these 4 edges frequently. So we're seeing a little bit of other teams just slowing it down. We're able to take that 4 edges and just really with frequency. And you got to hand it to Dickert. Coach Dickert, just can't wait to see what we're going to do with the number 1 team in the North. Can you believe it? Oregon State. Who would ever think that we'd ever say that, right? Oregon State number 1 in the North, and they are tied with Arizona State. So who would ever think we'd see the day we're seeing the black and orange coming to town. And we're going to talk about the Beavs, Oregon State next, right here on the second half of the Podcast Coug.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the Podcast Coug Radio Network. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at PodcastCoug.com.
The real estate agent you work with matters, and a great agent helps you own the home of your dreams. And your dreams come true with James Laurie at Coldwell Banker Bain, representing clients like you 24/7, from condos to colonials and everything in between. If you're selling, buying, need a price analysis, or just a contractor referral, ask James, winner of the 2015 through 2019 International Coldwell Banker Diamond Award, with dozens and dozens of 5-star Zillow reviews and Seattle Magazine's 5-star award winner for 2018 through 2020. James Laurie, Coldwell Banker Bain, at 425-466-3672 or jameslaurie.net. Rock solid results.
You're listening to the Podcast Coug.
Two running backs in with the quarterback. Signals called. All man in motion going through to the right side. Hand left wings out to the right side. Touchdown, Washington State.
You are listening to the Podcast Coug.
Welcome back to the Podcast Coug. I am James Laurie. It's the second half of the Podcast Coug, where we're all things Cougar football, all things Cougs. Here we go. It's Oregon State, 1 p.m., Martin Stadium, Pac-12 Networks. And hey, just if you haven't heard, Washington State announced last Wednesday, everyone 12 and older, according to Coug football, that's attending any Coug football game is going to need to provide proof of vaccination or that FDA-approved negative COVID test taken 3 days before the game. So if you want to get to the game at Martin on Saturday, you need to show a proof of vaccination, your vax card. Hopefully it's digital. You can just download it on your phone, your notes, and flash it on your phone, or a COVID test. And that starts on Saturday, the implementation now. So, there's going to be kiosks all around, and there's, I think, three locations of kiosks around the Cub, Beasley, Cougville, down at Rogers Field, and 4 guest service kiosks positioned outside the stadium. So now this is all happening 3 hours prior to kickoff. So if you get early, there probably wouldn't be such a long line unless you show up right at like 12:30 or 12:45. So get there a little early, and so that's going to be a requirement to get in the stadium. So the students with a sport pass that's compliant is going to have that on their Cougar card, and they're going to be good, all good. So here we are, returning to the Palouse homecoming. It's homecoming Saturday. Weather's supposed to be great, 57 degrees, sunny. And here we are with the biggest surprise in the Pac-12 by far. They, every once in a while, right? Everybody's got to get to have a good year, right? It's just, that's life. And it might be Oregon State's year this year. I'm not saying we'll see them in Pasadena on January 1st, but I'm happy. They've just been in the basement for decades. I mean, it's been many, many years. I mean, they've had a few good years. They're sitting at 4-1, and they're undefeated at 2-0 in conference play. Oregon State's favored by 3.5, and we are facing the hottest team in the conference, Orange, Black, and Orange State. Let's say Orange, Black, and Orange State. My gosh, they are went from pretenders to contenders, right? I mean, just an unblemished, perfect record right now, 2-0. We've been there. We've been there with Leach several times. We've been there with Price. We've had great years, 5-0, 6-0, 7-0. But you got to think that all those guys, all the fans, all the students down in Corvallis are just going crazy. I'm sure they're going to bring so many people to Martin Stadium up from Corvallis. It's going to be a huge game. There's going to be a lot of visitors, a lot of Orange and Blacks in the stand, so we need to show up, right? So, two teams that are the other team, Arizona State, they're also 2-0. So with two teams at the crossroads this season, Saturday is going to be a day not to miss. Huskies are off. They have a bye, so they're going to be watching our game, right? They're going to be watching, right? And, we own Oregon State, right? 7 years in a row. We just own Oregon State. And, in traditional beatdowns year after year, Oregon State is a team like no other. I mean, just they are in unprecedented grounds, and could this be a trap game? I mean, think about it. There's always a trap game, always. If you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated, on the cover, sitting at 7-0, 8-0, you're rated in the top 15, and you just had a blowout the Saturday before, trap game, overconfidence. Could the Beavers be overconfident coming into Martin Stadium on Saturday? It's possible. Think about it. With USC and the Huskies, they could be. Absolutely, they could be. Or they could be smart and coached up and not listen to anything, right? Don't listen to the noise. Don't listen to anything in podcasts, reading any. I mean, just stay focused. Don't read anything. But can our defense stop their run game? That's the big question. Running the ball, 50 carries a game they're doing. We've got the defense, right? They've got the ground game. We've got the defense, and that's saying a lot because we have Borghi, McIntosh, and Delora, and they've got a ground game as well. But their ground game is pretty amazing. But we probably need to play with more power than speed with the Beavers, right? Oregon State averages 230 rushing yards per game. They rank first in the Pac-12, 15th in the country. The Beavs, like I said, they bulldozed USC down in the Coliseum. So, it's been 60 years since they won down there, and that place, as you know, is brutal. It's not easy to win. I mean, we've only won down there just a handful of times in 100 years. They beat Washington on the ground with a power game, with their good tackling, just power football. Oregon State ran the ball 50 times against the Huskies, right? Number one in scoring offense, number one rushing team. We've got a huge challenge, just huge. And we want to contain the running game, on their first and second downs. We have to. That first and second downs, that's just words though. It's easy to say we got to do that, but it's not easy because we got to force the Bees to look at their quarterback, to Chance Nolan, who's completed 7 of 15, 48 yards last weekend. Oregon State leads the Pac-12 in third down conversions because they're chunk plays. I mean, they're at 4 to 5 yards every time on early downs. First and second downs, they're chunking out 5 yards, 5 yards, 5 yards. They're clearly the best at what they do. It's old school football. It's the run football that you had just growing up or in junior high school. I'm just saying this is old-fashioned football. It's power run plays, right? So that you always saw growing up as a kid. So these chunk plays, first and second down, they just create a lot of first downs, right? So it's got to start up front, right? Being physical. Unless Oregon State has an off day or they're overconfident, I don't see how we can contain them consistently. They've just got a power ground game machine. I mean, it's simply, we've got to start up front. The Cougs are 12th in the nation with 11 takeaways, and they are better tacklers in space than in the past. And their front, our front just needs to be continually improved to push, and we seem to be developing a resilient identity. So, our defense has allowed no more than 2 touchdowns in 3 of its last 4 games this year. So, with our pass rush, our secondary, we're looking good, and we keep improving. Jalen Watson, Derek Lanford, had a great game against Cal. Everybody needs to do their job, do it well. Everybody needs to come together on defense. And again, Oregon State is in first place in the Pac-12 North, beating the Huskies 27-24. And that was their first win in nine games, in the past 9 games with the Huskies. So they haven't, it's not very often, that they beat the Huskies, right? So, they did kick a field goal as time expired to win that game. But, interesting that when we see, to see if we can compete with the best. I mean, our defense is going to have to match up pretty well against Oregon State. Oregon State's biggest weakness, though, is their passing defense, and that ranks 9th in the Pac-12. So we own Oregon State, but, all bets are off on Saturday. I mean, forget the past, right? This is a whole new dimension here at Oregon State. And so huge win if we can pull it off. If we can't, look out. Oregon State in uncharted territory, leading the North, waiting for someone to knock them off. Is it going to be us? Are we going to knock off Oregon State, or is it going to be somebody else? you just don't run the table these days. You just don't. It's so rare. I mean, unless you're Alabama, right? So who's going to knock off Oregon State? Are we going to, right? So Oregon State has realized that they have to have a breakthrough, and they've got it with Jonathan Smith. He's at the top of their game. This is his fourth year, and he's running the nation's most productive ground games. So they rank, first in the Pac-12 in rushing yards at 230. They also sit at 15th in the nation in points. B.J. Baylor has literally emerged as their standout halfback. Baylor leads the country, actually in the conference, in rushing yards, 107 a game, right? So leading the conference, and with 9 touchdowns as well, 533 yards, and number 12 in totally in the nation, and 7 yards per carry, 16th in the nation. So, like I said, Beavers beat the Huskies between the tackles and overpowered, USC's defense. So, the week earlier in the Coliseum, and they just run unafraid. I mean, they are literally unafraid. Chance Nolan, their quarterback, throws about 200 yards per game, but he completes passes he's about 68% his efficiency. And so they're complete. They are number one at converting third downs in the red zone, by the way. And it's their defense. It's defense is pretty good, including their Pac-12's leading tackler. So this Avery Roberts is the leading tackler in the Pac-12. So they've got a good defense as well. They just allowed 2 rushes of 20 yards or more. That's it. You're not going to be able to just take off. Hello, Dion and Max. I mean, these guys are amazingly it. And while it's, run stop is improving, the Cougs defense front hasn't really been incredibly consistent in stopping the run. We've allowed like 141 yards per game. No question, the hottest team in the conference is Oregon State. And, 4 straight that they've won, blowouts they had with Hawaii, Idaho, SC. Huskies wasn't a blowout, but dang, they beat them, right? So something we haven't done since 2012, So again, we have not lost to Oregon State in 8 years. That's 2013. We've won 7 games in a row. And remember, Oregon State was Rolovich's first win as a head coach last year. So we won that game last year, 38-28 in Corvallis, despite missing 32 players because of either injuries or COVID. Delora had a great game and a very impressive debut from Delora. 227 yards, running for another 53, and scoring 3 times. McIntosh had his breakout game, totaling 153 yards and a touchdown and 18 carries. So Calvin Jackson and Travell Harris keep doing their thing. They're emerging with a combination of 57 receptions, 581 yards total, 7 TDs for the year between Calvin Jackson and Travell Harris. So keep going. They are emerging. But, hats off, though, to Jonathan Smith. He's persevered. There's been just a revolving door at Oregon State. Remember how Anderson, the coach before Jonathan Smith, just gave up? I mean, he walked away with a very large salary. He just gave up. He just quit. Gave up. And Jonathan Smith, 4th year, he's persevered so much that it's paying off. The stars are lining up for the orange and black. And I'm kind of happy for them. And the reason why is because everybody deserves to be at the top of the conference at least once in a while, right? I mean, how great is it when we are leading the conference and we're ranked in the top 10? It's wonderful. Those years were great. It's a great ride, and I'm sure Corvallis is just let's hope they're overconfident, right? We want them just overconfident, trap game, just catch them off guard. Nobody can run the table except for Alabama. It's very, very unlikely they're going to run the table. So let's do it, right? And did you know that back to Jonathan Smith, that he actually taught quarterbacks at Idaho from 2004 to 2009? I think that he worked with Rob Akey. Rob was the head coach of the Vandals back then. Rob, by the way, Rob's over at Central Michigan as their DC. So there you go. We've got the hottest team in the Pac-12 coming to Martin Stadium on Saturday. I'm going to be there, and we need a packed-out stadium. Don't forget those COVID requirements, right, to get you in the stadium. Weather, again, looks great. Sunny, temperatures around high 50s. It's looking great for Saturday, Oregon State. I've never been so excited for an Oregon State game in my entire life until now. Never have been. Love going to Corvallis. It is, I have to agree, it's one of the best college camp. It's beautiful down there. It's their marketing is the best college town in the Pac-12. And it is. It's a beautiful campus. It's beautiful. Colors are really hard to wrap your mind around, that Beaver logo and the black and orange. But you know what? I'm happy for them. And I've never been more excited to watch an Oregon State game. These guys are good. They're just starting. Who knows? They are for real. You just don't beat USC in the Coliseum and then go ahead and beat the Huskies, and, they're 4-0. The momentum. So let's knock them off, right? Hey, that's it for episode 6 of our 6th season here at the Podcast Coug. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Check out our new website at podcastcoug.com. It's Oregon State at Washington State Saturday. God bless and go Cougs.
You've been listening to the Podcast Coug with your host, James Laurie. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the Podcast Coug Radio Network. Find us at podcastcoug.com.
N-G-T